Good evening. In the past 10 years, I figured up once that I have done maybe a couple of thousand shows on television, which seems to me like an awful lot. But I'm a piker compared with my next guest tonight, Agnes Nixon. My guest tonight. Mrs. Nixon has had a TV show on the air every day for the past 22 years, which, if you're quick with figures, you know adds up to close to 10,000 shows. She is the writer and in many cases creator of daytime serials, otherwise known as soaps or soap operas, and that is the form, as you know, which is occasionally regarded as the Dutch elm disease of TV drama, but perhaps more often as the modern-day successor to the serials of Charles Dickens. In particular, Mrs. Nixon is the presiding genius of what is probably the most popular and successful of all the soaps. It's watched on campuses and in high places and low places, All My Children. And when you hear her thoughts about that show, and I think about television in general and how she works and develops her stories, I think you'll agree that there's a great deal, perhaps more Dickens than Dutch elm disease in her operation. So will you welcome, please, Agnes Nixon. Could we clear up something right away?
All right.
Did you or did you not get into the business as a refugee from or as an alternative to the garment burial business?
You're right, I did.
Burial
garment
business, yes.
That ghost comes out to haunt me. Yes. Well, my father manufactured burial garments, and he wanted me to go into the business with him. And he said I had no talent as a writer, and I really had to go in and manufacture burial garments. And you don't really want to know anything more about burial garments except that I had to write, you see, because, I mean, the alternative was...
Anything but...
Yes.
Were there endless jokes about no customer has ever complained or...
Oh, I wrote a commercial for him once, but he didn't think it was funny at all. I said, come in and see yourself as others will see you. It's a suit you can literally wear to the grave. No customer has come back to complain. But he didn't think it was funny.
You never did one about a layaway plan? Well, never mind. I guess it... and you were also, at a time, for a time, I mean, an aspiring actress and left according to...
Yes, that was when I was at Northwestern, and I was in the same class with Charlton Heston and Martha Heyer and Pat Neal and Jean Hagen, and I thought I better write.
You couldn't take the stiff competition?
No, once, you know, when I saw Chuck Heston do Pygmalion, I thought, well, that does it, Eckhart. That was my name then.
Well, I'm sorry. I wish we hadn't started with the jokes because everything now, like stiff competition, is going to seem to refer to burial garments, and there's no way out of this. Shall we move on from that into the real business?
Yes.
There is something, well, people know there's a lot of money in the soap world, both for creators, actors, sponsors, I suppose, networks. And
not as much as nighttime. We know that, don't we? We'll get that cleared up.
The budgets are different.
Right, yes.
But it's a nice living.
Oh, yes.
Therefore, there must be a lot of people who would like to get in on it, and there must be people who say, I can't see why I couldn't have created that soap opera. All you have to do is think of a group of people and get them going. It's not so simple, obviously.
No, well, first of all, what I find so often people asking me questions about it, they don't realize that one still has to be a writer. I mean, that's a sine qua non. And after that, it's a form and a technique. But certainly, and it surprises me. I suppose people do look down their noses often at soaps, but still to think that one can do it and not have the talent and the hard work that goes with it. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people think they can write soap opera who would never think they could write a book or a play or a movie, even a poem.
And the way a new soap opera is born is by what in the movies it's called the presentation, but what you call the Bible?
Well, I still call it a presentation. The Bible really, to me, is the long-term story and the characters. And yes, I suppose in the original presentation, there are character sketches, because you're starting from scratch and casting perhaps 20 parts. So it's more of a Bible than the later Bibles, if one could say that, which are just long-term stories.
There's a book by Dan Wakefield about you and the whole world of soap opera, and in that, when you presented this thing that is whatever it is called the Bible, you had a quote at the beginning that had a kind of biblical ring to it. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Well, yes, and it was funny because all my children, the theme of all my children to me is the brotherhood of man, and the my refers to a greater being, a deity, no matter what sect or Buddhism or Judaism or Catholicism or whatever that might be. And so I wrote a little thing, and I don't remember it literally, but it was something like, the greatest and the least, the rich and the poor, in sickness and health, and joy and sorrow, you are all my children. And this was 8 years ago. An executive from ABC called and asked me what part of the Bible that was taken from. So I said it was the Gospel according to St. Agnes.
Which you then tried to look up?
No, he understood that.
Obviously, variety is the Bible of show business.
Yes.
You're familiar with Cavett. Now, perhaps we could get at what really goes into a soap and what has to be considered in making one up. You can reject this idea if you want. Let's say I'm the kind of person who looks at it and says, I could think up a soap, and I will give you an idea for one. And then tell me how I would go, where I would go from there. Let's say my idea is this, that they've never thought of doing a soap opera about the actors in a permanent repertory company. Now, this would be good because you can have a variety of people, young and old. You could have sexual jealousy, you could have career jealousy, you could have promiscuity, you could have bisexuality, you could even have heterosexuality, if you don't want to shock people, and booze and contrasting personalities, success and failure.
All ages.
Heartache and joy.
Well.
Now, why isn't that enough of an idea for someone at the network to say, that's great, Cavett.
Well,
here's $200 million. Go to Nassau and develop it.
Well, because, well, I can only speak for the soaps that I've written and the way I work. And other people work other ways, but I work from character. And all the stories come out of character. That is why, if I may digress for a moment slightly, to say that a soap opera, a good soap opera, is so much an ensemble effort. The writing is only half of it, and then the other half is the production and the acting by people who become those people, so that when one's writing it, one is seeing those people in the parts. So I don't know, you may have a marvelous idea, Dick, but I'd have to know the people. If I'm now going to be a network exec, right? I've always wanted to be may I be a network exec just for a moment?
Yes, sure.
All right, fine.
All you have to do to become one is ask.
And so you would have to tell me what these characters, who they are, where they're coming from, I mean from the time of their birth, what their problems and complexities are, and then how they interrelate with everyone else. Because on a soap opera, we have a cast budget. And so we can't have little islands of people. They must, the shows, and now we're an hour a day, and we have 9 stories going, but not every day, but because you can't kill the actors and make them work every day. But still, those people must be somehow be interrelated, or there has to be a thread running through it.
So you as the exec would say, give me more character detail. And
give me more character detail and the interrelation of characters and the interpersonal relationships. And
so I would say something like, well, the leading man appears to be 40, but is actually 55, was promising years ago, but career seems to have passed him by. He's now in a small company. Bogart got all his movie roles. He's embittered, he drinks a bit, and he has a lech for ladies in their 20s, of whom Penelope is one, who is the ingenue in the company, and so on.
Well,
is that enough, or do you want more than that?
I want more than that. Oh, much more than that.
Well, I'm going to another network then. If you're too
we
dumb
didn't
to
have
see
a time period right now anyway.
Well, anyway, so you need more.
Yes, don't you see? You have to know what the people. Why is he a lech? Did he have an unhappy childhood? Is he really homosexual, perhaps, and is trying to deny it? Or, I mean, and not necessarily all those things will be told on the air, but it's very important for us to know. We write in what I call the Iceberg Technique, and the little bit that's seen is nothing compared to all that's submerged, which we have to know for a textured show, to really know the people, to make them three-dimensional. We don't have any, classical villains. So, I mean, the most hated person on the show perhaps is also loved because they understand what makes these people the way they are, and the audience can literally say, there, but for the grace of God go I.
It's safe to say that you really believe in this. You don't feel that you're in a shabby profession that...
Oh, I don't at all. My husband says he knows that the show... Oh, no.
Housewife who's simply a brainless booby who's stuck at home.
Well, no, and besides that, we have about 30% men who watch. We have a professor at MIT who wrote and told us that Erica was the asp he'd most like to have in his bosom. And we have,
thank goodness for your diction.
We're very we're very Catholic in terms of audience, and I don't think, I think it's very hard work and very rewarding.
But I was amazed to learn how much significance, I guess, there is to your soap, and maybe the others too. But,
I think, it's everything.
but you have dealt with very difficult themes, all the tough ones, divorce, marriage, death, drugs,
child
I guess.
abuse. I think that
child
was the
abuse
most difficult.
Was said to be dealt with on your show in a way that did more for child abuse, I'm sure you understand what I mean, than anything else that those interested in getting the story out had been able to do in television or anywhere else.
Well, that's because I think, I hope it's because we did a good job of it and took 8 months to do it. And that's, in a way, what a soap opera can do that no other form of entertainment can do, because we have the time to present the stories and to make, in this case, have the audience understand that a child abuser is not evil but sick and needs help. So we were trying to reach the child abusers, saying, you need help, you will be given help, not punitive measures. And we were trying to reach the rest of the people to say, don't think of them as animals. They are your brothers. You must help them. If you have time, volunteer for these hotlines, get into these group therapy sessions and so on. And a lot of cities ran, that already had these centers and volunteer groups, the local stations ran ribbons. If you want to
That's the thing at the bottom of the screen.
Yes, if you want to contact the Child Abuse Center in your town, call so-and-so. I live outside of Philadelphia, and CAPE, which is our group there, was simply inundated with calls.
What do you think your audience is, assuming you trust the measuring device?
Well, I also trust my mail. I think that's even truer. That doesn't give you numbers, but it gives you, runs the whole gamut.
Do you have any idea how many people watch the show daily? Or?
Oh, well, now we have to go to the Nielsen, and they say about 10 million a day.
And it is watched on campuses. What is the appeal there? I'm told that if you checked in around the country at the common room where the TV is, every day the show is on, you would see students fighting over All My Children or whatever.
Well, yes, I think there was an article in a newspaper about 5 years ago when this phenomenon was discovered, and a student out at Long Island College said, hey, they're talking about us on Mom's Story. You know, it used to be Mom's Story, and now the kids realized that we were doing very contemporary things, lots of young people on the show. But I don't think it's just that. First, we have to give them believable characters in interesting and suspenseful situations. And I thought perhaps that's all it was, until a young man from, what's the school in North Carolina? Duke. Said, I asked him, can you tell me in 25 words or less what you really like about All My Children? And he said, well, I like everything, but perhaps the biggest thing is it's one of the few constants in our lives. We live in a very mobile society. We live in future shock, first of all. Just think of today, the kids who are 20, 21, we have 4 children, and we've stayed in one place, but so many friends have come and gone in their lives, and we have quite a hearth on All My Children. We have a family, a home with 3 generations in it. I grew up in that kind of a home. But not many people today have a mother and a father and a grandparent, you know.
That's right.
And I think that, aside from the fact that, they wouldn't tune in just to go eat Kate's apple pie in the kitchen, Grandma Kate, but it is a factor.
Yeah. And let's talk about the belief that people do have in soaps, characters. I didn't realize this until a couple of friends of mine who are actors got jobs in them. And they are totally unknown when they walk the streets to people who don't watch the show. But to those who do, they are bigger stars than the supposedly bigger stars. Well, yeah. And also there are people who literally, and I'm not misusing the word, believe in the shows, and they've occasionally had people come up who said, do you know that behind your back they're planning a letter that will get you fired, and Mona is out to get your job. And they're not talking to the actor, they're talking to the character.
But that,
and what are you doing here in Sioux Falls, they would say.
Exactly, you're supposed to be in jail.
The actor would be home on vacation or something.
But, you see, if one has into the millions of viewers, then one also runs the gamut of intelligence, I suppose, and education, and there are those who believe honestly and truly that they are people, but there are those who know perfectly well and who have a willing suspension of disbelief, know that Erica is Erica and is a bitch goddess, but will write her letters and say, we hate what you're doing, but don't stop doing it. And write to the actress, you see.
Yes, so there's an incident in Wakefield's book about you where, I think at a college, a seminar or a lecture or something, I don't know who the actress was, but they addressed several questions to her, and then imperceptibly, it switched to, why would you marry a man like that, and so on.
But even the actresses talk that way.
And she became the character with that.
Well, or an actress will say to you, well, now, and when I did so-and-so in that scene, I think that there's a little bit of that goes on with all of us, and I do. These people, to me, are very real, and they live quite apart from the hour they're seen on the air. I mean, they really, really do.
You certainly don't write the scripts all yourself. You'd be
oh heavens, no. I do the long-term story, which is sort of what's supposedly to happen for about a year, but now that we're an hour, it's about 6 months. And I just finished one which ran 80 pages, and that's with covering all the stories.
That projects how far into the future?
Well, about 6 months with an hour show.
Is that what you call the Dead Sea Scroll?
No. I meant to bring my Dead Sea.
Yes, I was going to ask you if you...
Oh dear, no. But that's, I take a page about that size, 8.5 by 11, and divide it into, 20 squares. And I just write the characters, after the show's been done, the characters in the show that day, and a little précis of what happened in that day's show. And someone else saw it once and said, my gosh, the Dead Sea Scrolls, because I write very small, and even in shorthand, and it's totally indecipherable except to me.
And the name stuck.
Yes, but I do that. We have a writer's office, and Wisner Washam and Jack Wood work with me in fact, they work quite by themselves often on the daily outlines. Those must be done. For each episode, a script is outlined act by act, scene by scene. Then that's given to an associate writer who puts it into script form. I often write scripts myself, but we have Jack and Wisner and then 5 associate writers.
Are there people who just have a talent for plotting that you can rely on if you go dry on...
Yes, well, Wisner and Jack, right.
Are called plotters or plottists?
Plottists.
Plottists, yeah.
We are plotting plottists.
I guess what I mean is, are there people who have a talent for that, but can't write dialogue?
Oh, I don't think so. Well, no. Both
Wisner
Wisner and Jack wrote dialogue for quite a while before they did the other.
By the way, do they discount the men viewers? Because we tried to get some information on statistics of who watches the show, and we could not get anything about the male viewers.
I know, and I think and I tell you about the male viewers because the men often are more vocal than the women in writing. And make such cogent comments. But there are those autometers. I think Nielsen, we should speak to him and have them sort of reevaluated and put them in those student union lounges. And we have 8 bank executives in Seattle who watch us every day on lunch hour. But you see, there's nothing that judges that they're viewing.
Oh, you're telling me. Because throughout my career, I've been known to be watched on college campuses. I once had Nielsen on, and I said, how come you don't measure, there are 7,000 colleges, and in the common rooms they say my shows are doing so. And he would say, yeah, that's a good idea.
And it never happened?
He never did it, though.
Well, maybe we could sort of...
No, I'm not going to complain about it now. But he may not be doing it now.
He still isn't.
No, as far as you know, they don't. But that's an enormous audience. I mean, that disqualifies the whole Nielsen system.
Well, I feel so. I don't... Of course, we feel that those people, and there's a turnover, and they grow up, and in 4 years they'll be governing sets. But I still think it's an enormous inequity because they just have those autometers or whatever those little things are called, and they're there for daytime and nighttime and so on. And I don't think they're taking into account where people are at certain times of day. And it's certainly erroneous to think, just housewives today when whatever percentage it is are out working. I mean, we have people who are watching, women who used to be at home, now they're out working, and they take their little portable to the office with them.
Yes, and more people are getting the recording devices so they can see shows like that
yes, but that's
the
still
next day.
minority.
I still think it's fascinating that the shows have a whole world of people who watch them that are unsuspected, even by members of their own family. I don't know if you know how much you're aware of this, but I know an insurance man who has an excuse. I forget what it is. He claims that he takes a Russian lesson or something, and he actually goes home and sees all my children, and then goes back to work and carries his Russian book with him.
Well, I got a letter from
But he doesn't
man.
attend the class, and he doesn't want it known that he's a soap addict.
Well, we at Princeton University about 4 years ago, they had a contemporary culture course, and they were doing a contemporary book, novel, biography, play, movie, etc. And the professor said, "What television show?" And they all said, "All My Children." And his name is George Forgy, and he had never watched the show. And we went down and spoke at their final class, but he is now such a fan, and he is now at the University of Texas, University in Austin. And he said that on the campus there, and he has a professor at Stanford who watches, a friend, and they have a sort of a code back and forth that they can call each other and not pay, I better not tell, but they cheat the phone company. But find out a little bit of what happened that day.
What kind of person would cheat the phone company? Certainly nobody I know. Well, yeah, but that's fascinating that it reaches into all levels, and it's not just the ironing housewife, not to discount her.
No, and Fra Heflin, who plays Mona, Van Heflin was her brother, and she plays Mona on All My Children. And what I found is that so many people are very interested in the autumnal romances or September song romances, which we have on the show too. She and Fra and her husband, Saul, were walking down Fifth Avenue, and a priest stopped her. And he apologized. He said, "I know I'm being very rude. I'm here from my parish in New Jersey. I watch you every day, and I just have to know if you think Dr. Tyler's going to divorce Phoebe and marry you." And Fra said, "Oh, here I was, and I didn't want, a Catholic priest." And so she said, "I thought I'd just toss it in his lap." And I said to him, "Well, Father, I really don't know. What do you think should happen?" And he said, "Well, the church does allow for extenuating circumstances, you know." and Phoebe really is a witch.
Well, people have tried incredible devices, I know, to try to get out of you what's going to happen. There's even the device of the man saying, "My dear old mother is dying, and she has to know whether so-and-so is going to divorce so-and-so before she goes."
The cancer caper, too. It's terrible to say that, but if someone is saying, "I have 6 months to live, and I have to know how it's going to end," I don't know how it's going to end. A gal called me about 4 years ago from on the main line, Philadelphia, and said, "I know this is rude. My husband said it's terrible of me, but he's being transferred to Mannheim, Germany. We're with the Army, and I'm not going to go unless you tell me what's going to happen."
I'm sure people have done that, have refused jobs out of the country.
I don't know. So I said, "Well, I don't know what's going to happen for 2 years, but I'll tell you a few things if you promise not to tell." And now she's back, and then she said she got filled in. But the interesting thing is that so much happens. So much does happen now.
Well, it's an incredible world to me, because I found that there's even a newspaper printed that synopsizes the plots for people who missed them. By the way, I think one of the trickiest ways, things that you seem to do so well on the show, is writing. You do account for people who may miss an episode or something, and is that what you call a recapitulation, where a person has to say something?
Yes, but we really don't do it that much. We feel if we make an interesting show and the audience thinks they missed something, they can ask their next door neighbor or so on. And I think it's better not to have too much recapping.
Well,
we have a lot of humor, too, in our show, really.
The recapping is, of course, the thing that's easily parodied, isn't it? I mean, if a character says, "Isn't it too bad that Bob fell down the church steps the day his novel wasn't published, and then he got a sadistic nurse and forgot to give him
and we
sleeping
call that
pills.
soapy.
The dog died, and that's you have to avoid that.
We do avoid it.
Well, exactly how far ahead do you know now? If you were attached to a lie detector machine.
Well, I know approximately a year what's going to happen. However, as I said before, that long term is written, but it is simply like an itinerary one would plan for a trip. It's in the daily plotting that it really happens.
And can't you change your mind?
That's
or are
right.
you committed to that year?
Oh, you absolutely are not committed to it. The network hasn't read it yet. They may not like it. They may want, but it's in the daily episodes, and you simply are not, because we really do think of a lot of nuances and turns and detours that are interesting and dramatic. And
I have a friend, actor friend, John Cunningham, who was in one of the other soaps, and I called him one day, and he said, I'm going to be shot. And I said, why don't you call the police? He was going to be wiped out in one of the early episodes. And I said, why don't you, when they fire the gun, why don't you say, ha, missed? It turns out that somebody has thought of this before. I think someone actually did something like that, or threatened to.
Well, that was during the day, probably when it was live. Now it's on tape. I think they
on
would
the live
stop
shows,
tape for that. Right, yes.
Somebody just refused to be written out.
Well, one of the funniest things that ever happened on a live tape show was an actor thought it was the rehearsal. He'd forgotten.
Yes.
And he did have quite a hunk of recapitulation. And so he went through it, and then he turned to the audience and said, as all you viewers out in video land know anyway, and went right on with the show. And afterwards he said, now what time is air? And they said, we've done it.
Did you hear bodies hitting the floor in the control room?
It wasn't a show I was associated with, but And then there's the...
Is he now selling burial garments?
I think he's wearing one.
Well, I have a feeling that we're out of time. I'm sorry, this has been a very fast time. But thanks for giving us chapter and verse from the, what did you call it, the Gospel according to St. Agnes or whatever?
Thank you for having me.
And it was a great pleasure. Thank you.
Delightful.
We'll see you tomorrow night. Good night.
Funding for The Dick Cavett Show has been provided by this station and other public television stations, and by a grant from the Chubb Group of insurance companies.
Oh, yes, sir.